Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 episode number 91 based on novel. So let's start. Hua Yuhao's spiritual power began to compress under Skydream's direction. Skydream had given his spiritual origin to Hua Yuhao, but he still had the most substantial spiritual imprint, one that had been baptized by 1,000,000 years of life. Unless the Calamity Necromancer Electrolux came back to life, there was nobody else in the world that could compare to Skydream in terms of spiritual power manipulation. Yes, this was a form of spiritual power manipulation. Spiritual power was an energy that originated from the spirit world, and was presented as far more abstract and illusory compared to soul power. The effects that spiritual power could achieve often couldn't be compared to soul power on the same level. The energy that belonged to the spiritual realm and soul power were like two parallel lines that did not intersect. If soul masters were to choose which power they wanted to boost, almost all soul masters would choose soul power. This didn't mean soul power was stronger than spiritual power, it was because soul power was a lot easier to control and manipulate than spiritual power. A soul master had to rely on his spiritual power to control his soul power, while going deeper and manipulating spiritual power directly was an extremely high-level ability. Hua Yuhao's spiritual power control was mainly present in two forms. The first was his sovereign's descent that dragon god Doluor Mu Ien had imparted to him, where he would delicately fuse spiritual power and soul power. He would produce immense fighting strength after fusing both energies when he was in a unique spiritual state. The other form referred to his multiple soul skills. Hua Yuhao's spiritual power at this point was strong enough for his spiritual detection to reach a 600-meter radius around him, and he could reach more than 3 kilometers if he used it in a single direction. However, what if he didn't have spiritual detection as a soul skill? How far could he sense if he just used pure spiritual power? That would be a question of his control over his spiritual power. Why were Hua Yuhao's attacks more powerful, and all his Spirit Eye's soul skills amplified, when he released his Eye of Destiny? The Eye of Destiny actually gave him better control over his spiritual power, and also had that mystical power of destiny. Exemplary spiritual control required more than just formidable spiritual power. One also had to continually practice using it. Hua Yuhao's spiritual power control was unrivaled among other soul masters of his level, but he was way too far below Skydream's standard. The compressed spiritual power gradually flowed into the pouch. Hua Yuhao felt as if Skydream were using his spiritual power to form a key, and Skydream was soundlessly and discreetly opening the door in front of him. The pouch's spiritual seal was exceedingly tough. Skydream went deeper in his attempt to open it, and Hua Yuhao realized that the iceworm had underestimated the spiritual seal's strength. The seal was extremely solid, and he wouldn't be able to open it even if he was a soul emperor if he used his current cultivation level as an estimate. He would probably require his martial soul true body to have enough control to open this pouch by himself. However, the seal couldn't stump Skydream. The compressed spiritual power became increasingly focused under Skydream's control and gradually drilled into the seal, unraveling it from the inside. This was a great opportunity for Hua Yuhao. Skydream was controlling his spiritual power after all, and this meant that Hua Yuhao could clearly feel the entire manipulation process. This was greatly beneficial to learn how to manipulate spiritual power. Hua Yuhao began to feel a little dizzy from time to time as spiritual power continued flowing out. He could feel that his spiritual C's level was plummeting, but he wasn't worried at all. Skydream had a complete understanding of Hua Yuhao's spiritual power, and he naturally wouldn't do something that he wasn't confident of, and would never hurt Yuhao, either. An hour passed, then a soft ding sound could be heard as the pouch's mouth emanated a strange golden light. This golden light transformed into a green streak before it disintegrated into fine specks and gradually vanished into the air. The golden light on Skydream's body disappeared along with the lights. He grunted and said, "The seal was strong, but it couldn't stump me. Don't be too hasty to look at the pouch, Hua Yuhao. You should meditate as soon as possible. Wait for your spirit to recover before anything else. If you don't recover from this extent of spiritual power consumption as soon as possible, it will affect your spiritual C's volume." He returned to the fourth finger on Hua Yuhao's left hand as he spoke, and transformed back into a jade ring. Hua Yuhao had intended to meditate even if Skydream hadn't reminded him. He had become a little dizzy, and his vision even became a little blurry from all the spiritual power consumption. Hua Yuhao crossed his legs and sat down as he focused his eyes and looked inwards. The dizziness and fatigue helped him enter his meditative state even faster than he normally did, and his consciousness became more focused, while his spiritual C gradually returned to its usual calm. The pouch shone with faint light, which gradually grew pale as it laid silently on the bed beside Hua Yuhao. The pain in Hua Yuhao's chest and between his ribs was taken care of by his powerful regenerative abilities by the time he woke up from meditation, while more than half of his spiritual power had been restored. Hua Yuhao took a deep breath and gradually opened his eyes. Soul power naturally circulated around his body, and the gentle, flowing undulations became smooth and flourishing. His body had been growing physically while his cultivation had increased over time. Due to the shock from his martial soul fusions with both Wang Donga and Wang Chua, and his spiritual sea reaching the boundless ocean level that nourished his body, he was now increasingly resistant to his ultimate martial soul's negative effects, so his cultivation speed was now conspicuously faster than before. He glanced at the sky outside. The sky was dark blue, night was about to recede, and dawn was coming. Hua Yuhao's emotions had naturally calmed down after a night of meditation, and his initial pleasant surprise from Skydream's awakening had subsided. He felt calm and at peace, which also meant he naturally thought about the troubles that he was about to face. How am I going to explain yesterday's situation to Donga? It feels like there's no way I can explain this properly. No matter how unintentional it was, the truth is that I still touched her in the end. Will Donga forgive me? Should I lie? Should I craft a white lie? Hua Yuhao began to feel stuck at this mental barrier once more. He cared too much about Donga, and that was the reason why he didn't want any blemish or wedge to exist between their feelings in their relationship. What should I do? Hua Yuhao stood up and opened the window, fresh air flooding the room through the opening. He immediately felt his spirits lift after the cold morning wind coursed over his body. Forget it. I'm just going to tell her the truth. It's still better than me coming up with a lie, as a lie will need countless other lies to cover up for it. Furthermore, I don't even know how to explain it to Wang Chua. It will weigh on my conscience if I craft lies, and I will be feeling this guilt for a long time to come. It's better to have a short period of suffering than a long one. I will explain it to Donga, and I will tell her everything about the situation before I will attempt to ask her for forgiveness. Once I smooth things out with Donga, I will find an opportunity to apologize to Wang Chua. The positive energy of honesty gained the upper hand in the end. Very often, lies could solve problems temporarily, but they were usually unable to solve problems permanently. Lies would pile up day after day, and the day would come when all these lies would erupt, and it would be very difficult to remedy the situation once that day arrived. Hua Yuhao made up his mind, and was no longer despondent. He hadn't done anything wrong in theory. If Donga was still unsatisfied, perhaps he would just touch her a few times too. A strange smile appeared on Hua Yuhao's face as he thought about this, and his heart began to beat faster. Donga isn't as developed as Wang Chua. I wonder how it will feel at home. That's way too far. How can you be so indecent and wretched, Hua Yuhao? How can you have these thoughts in your mind? He slapped himself lightly across the face, and pulled back his wandering mind. There would always be a path to take when the time came, and there was a solution to everything. He could probably fix a few sumptuous meals for Donga, and he could say some nice and sweet things to her, and this whole thing would blow over. Hua Yuhao lowered his head and glanced at the extra ring on his left hand that Skydream had formed, making sure that last night wasn't a dream, and his mood immediately became better. Skydream was awake now, he had changed himself into a spirit, and he had given Hua Yuhao another soul skill. The big competition was coming soon, so this was as good news could get. Hua Yuhao had his own plans for the future. However, he had never told anyone about them, not even Wang Donga knew about them. No matter what happened in the future, this season's competition was the most important task he had to face at the moment. Oh, yes. I have yet to see what's inside the pouch. Hua Yuhao immediately recalled the pouch that had been opened the previous night when he looked at Skydream's ring, and hurriedly returned to his bed. The pouch was still lying silently on the bed, and Hua Yuhao bent down to pick it up. The truth was that he was quite curious about its contents. Niu Tian, the Clear Sky sect leader, had asked Wang Donga to pass this pouch to him, but the pouch had been sealed. On the surface, it seemed as if Niu Tian didn't want Wang Donga to see this pouch's contents. What can it be that Donga can't see, but I can? If he hadn't interacted with Niu Tian and Tai Tan, he would have concluded they were trying to mess around with him. However, he had met the two sect leaders before, so he erased that thought from his mind. Hua Yuhao reached into the pouch after opening it. There was an ancient-looking parchment inside, which turned out to be extremely large after he unfolded it. It was almost twice the size of normal letter-writing paper. The parchment's edges weren't regular, and it looked as if it had been made without being properly cut, which made it appear more primitive and ancient. The parchment had two sections. The first part seemed like a letter, while the second part looked like a map. Hua Yuhao sat down beside his bed in confusion. He took a look at the letter's contents. His face immediately turned ghastly pale after that one look, and his hands even began to shake. Yuhao, I trust that you'll have the ability to complete this task when you can see this letter. I hesitated one too many times before I decided to pass this responsibility to you. I told Donga when I gave this pouch to her that she can only give this pouch to you when she's sure that you will become her future husband, and only when she knows that you're worth all her heart and all her love. It seems like you've already done that, so both my younger brother and I wish you two all the best. However, there's something I have to tell you, as this concerns your future with Donga. Donga was born within the Clear Sky sect, and her physique has been extremely weak ever since she was born. My younger brother and I, as well as her parents, tried everything we could to strengthen her body, but all our attempts were futile. We suddenly discovered when she was 3 years old that she had a strange, very unique disease. You should know that a human's martial soul is still dormant at the age of 3, and it will only awaken at the age of 6. However, Dornga's martial soul was strangely awakened when she was 3 years old, and 2 appeared at the same time. Her physique was congenitally weak, and the premature awakening of her martial souls took an immense toll on her body. This episode created an enormous hidden wound. You will notice upon close inspection that a golden trident-like pattern will appear on her forehead when she's stretching the limits of her body and her abilities. That pattern is a seal that her father put on her to suppress the hidden wounds in her body. Her parents are roaming the world in order to find exotic herbs and medicines to remedy her disease. That's the reason why they're often not at the Clear Sky sect, while my brother and I take care of her. Her father mentioned to me that the seal can only suppress her internal wounds until she turns 20, and if they still can't fix her injuries by the age of 20, then she might. Hua Yuhao began to feel the weight of this letter as he read these words. He felt as if a large hand was tightly wound around his heart, and the heartache was almost suffocating. He couldn't wait to read the rest of the letter's contents. Dornga's parents finally found a herb that could fix Dornga's internal wounds during one of their perennial attempts. The only problem was that this herb is too challenging to retrieve, as the criteria were too difficult to satisfy. This herb can only be retrieved by a man that loves her, and this man has to use his blood to retrieve this herb. Forcefully plucking this plant will damage it, and it will lose its medicinal effects. It has a very apt name. It's called yearning heartbroken grass. We've tried every method we could think of to retrieve it, but every attempt ended up being fruitless. In order to retain this last strand of hope, we could only swallow it down and wait for the person that loves Dornga to appear. When Dornga passes this pouch to you, she will be deeply in love with you, and will no longer holding anything back. I don't know how you feel about Dornga, as she has always been a girl dressed like a guy before this. However, if you do open this pouch, and when you read this letter, ask yourself whether your love for Dornga is deep enough and focused enough. I implore you as Dornga's senior that you retrieve that herb for her. This is for your future happiness, and also for Dornga's life. Dornga's parents are always outside searching for substitute medicines, but Dornga is 17 years old now. She's nearing 20, and her parents haven't returned. Hope is gradually slipping away. Therefore, both Titan and I were exceptionally delighted when we first saw you, as you have given us real hope. This was the reason we tested you in all the ways that we did, so that we could assess whether your mentality would allow you to become Dornga's savior. We were quite satisfied with the outcome. At least, we saw many virtues on you before you left. Dornga has made a great choice, and you're a man that is worthy of her. However, Dornga's life is starting to count down, and I plead that you retrieve that yearning heartbroken grass, so that Dornga's hidden injury can be fixed. The reason why there's a seal on this letter is because Dornga doesn't know about all this. We wanted to let her grow up happily, so we have never told her about this. We love her too much, and our only hope is that she can grow up peacefully and happily. Yuhao, I sincerely plead that you do not tell her the truth before you bring back that yearning heartbroken grass. Even if you don't successfully complete this task in the end, we hope that she will be happy and peaceful in her last days. Hua Yuhao's hands clenched unwittingly at this point. He had not expected that Dornga had such a fatal injury, and that she only had a little more than 2 years left to live. This was something that Hua Yuhao couldn't accept, no matter what. He grit his teeth and forced his tears back, as he knew that he had to be strong at times like these. He knew that even if he was left with a single thread of hope, he had to bring back the herb that could save Dornga's life. He bit down hard on his lower lip and left a deep bite mark. He was stimulated by the pain, and refocused his attention as he continued reading the parchment. The map below depicts where the yearning heartbroken grass is located. This is a place filled with danger and peril, and it's also a place inhabited by soul beasts, while the exact location where the yearning heartbroken grass grows is even more hazardous. There is a detailed introduction of the plants that grow in the area below the map. You have to try and find a book when you reach it that Dornga's father personally left it behind. The book details all sorts of herbs and poisonous plants and their differences, and it will also guide you to find the yearning heartbroken grass. There are detailed instructions and signs on the map that will lead you to where the book is hidden. You have to find the book first before you search for the yearning heartbroken grass. Also, please remember not to venture too far inside. That place is charged with the origin energy of heaven and earth, and these herbs and poisonous plants have been living there for far too long, to the point where some have evolved into plant-type soul beasts. These soul beasts will bring great danger and trouble to you. Please go, if you truly love Dornga. We will await your good news. Do take care of yourself. Niu Tian had signed off beneath the text. Hua Yuhao couldn't care about anything else as he read the last sentence. He sprang to his feet and surveyed his surroundings, and there was only one thought in his head. I have to go, right now. I have to help Dornga find that life-saving herb. He didn't want to dally around for another second as he thought about this. He originally wanted to leave a note for Dornga before he took off, But his mind was a mess, and he recalled that Niu Tian had mentioned in the letter that he couldn't tell Donga about this matter, at least not before he found that yearning heartbroken grass. He was irrational and more confused because he simply cared too much for her. Under these circumstances, he only took a few clean sets of clothes before he raced out of the room. Huo Yuhao stopped in his tracks when he arrived at the staircase. He took a deep look at Donga's room. It's still early. I'm sure Donga is still sleeping or cultivating. Don't worry, Donga. I will pay any price to bring back that life-saving herb for you. Huo Yuhao quickly darted down the stairs. He widened his stride once he exited the Sea God's pavilion, and he ran as fast as he could towards the academy's main gate. He was just so worried, and it felt as if Wang Donga's life would be in danger with every moment that he delayed. Right as he flew down towards the lakeshore and soared towards the outer courtyard, a pair of astonished eyes watched Huo Yuhao's frustrated and urgent behavior from a place not too far away. Where's he off to? The pair of huge blue eyes flowed with doubt and suspicion. Me. That bastard. That day I can't let him off the hook. I'm going to follow him. The owner of this pair of blue eyes flew into the sky while these thoughts ran through her mind. She raced across the lake in pursuit of Huo Yuhao. Huo Yuhao didn't wish to stick around for a moment longer. He immediately soared into the sky once he left Shrek Academy, and he extended the flying-type soul tool behind his back while he infused it with soul power. The soul tool propelled his body into the air, and he started flying into the distance. Huo Yuhao, come down right now! An exclamation rang out behind him. Huo Yuhao was momentarily stunned. However, he had already raced more than 10 meters away, and he quickly controlled his flying-type soul tool to turn around. He looked back and saw a figure with flowing blue hair drifting toward him. Donga. Huo Yuhao shouted in surprise. Wang Donga's image filled every corner of his mind at this moment. I'm not your Donga. Tell me, what should we do about what happened yesterday? Wang Chua said angrily. Huo Yuhao only realized that Wang Donga wasn't the one pursuing him. It was Wang Chua, who he had taken advantage of the previous day. I'm sorry, Chua. Yesterday was all my fault. However, I have something important to do right now. I will take all punishment and accept whatever you want to do to me when I come back. I need to go. He turned back around as he spoke, and his flying-type soul tool erupted with light once more. He couldn't be bothered with the entanglement between Wang Chua and himself. There was nothing more important than finding the herb that could save Wang Donga's life. Wang Chua could clearly see his frustrated and worried look. A thought crossed her mind as she stomped her right foot on the ground, and her body bolted forward. Wang Chua was unrivaled amongst others of the same level in terms of explosiveness over short distances. Huo Yuhao's flying-type soul tool still had an acceleration process, and he was only just speeding up before Wang Chua arrived behind him and grabbed his shoulder. Don't mess around, Wang Chua. I really have something important to do. Huo Yuhao exclaimed angrily. Wang Chua was equally furious. I'm messing around. Stop finding excuses for yourself. You took advantage of me yesterday. You're going to let it go just like that? Huo Yuhao had to drop back to the ground because of her forceful pressure. He shook his body vigorously and broke free from Wang Chua's grip. Wang Chua, I really have something very urgent to attend to. I've already said that you can do anything you want to me when I return. Is that not enough? Huo Yuhao's voice was solemn and intense. Wang Chua was momentarily stunned. This was the first time she had seen Huo Yuhao like this, and she asked doubtfully, even the color of your face has changed. What's up? Huo Yuhao's expression was truly discolored. His face was pale and tinged with green, his expression was as dark as it could get. Huo Yuhao shook his head and said, this has nothing to do with you. There's a place that I have to go to, and I have to go right now. I can't delay for another second. That's it. He turned around and prepared to leave as he spoke. Wang Chua blocked his path in a flash. You can't leave unless you explain it to me. Huo Yuhao clenched his fists, and his next words were squeezed out from between gritted teeth. My patience has its limits, Wang Chua. Don't think there's nothing I can do against you. Wang Chua grunted coldly and said, you have the confidence to defeat me. Come, try it. Huo Yuhao was momentarily stunned. He knew that he couldn't fight Wang Chua right now, as he had to retain his strength to search for that medicine to help Donga. He took a deep breath and suppressed the wrath in his heart, and he tried his best to make his voice gentler. He lowered his voice and said, all right, I'll explain. A friend of mine is severely injured, and I need to find an herb to save her life. To save her life, do you understand? I must find this herb, and her life might be in danger for every second that I waste, and if I'm too late. So, I beg you, please step aside and let me go, right now. He was close to shouting when he got to the last two words. Wang Chua was slightly taken aback when she listened to his explanation. She frowned and said, will it be dangerous? Huo Yuhao said decisively, I have to go even if I have to venture into the depths of hell. I've already explained it to you, so please don't stop me any longer. Otherwise, I will no longer treat you as a friend. He began to move once more as he spoke. Huo Yuhao, Wang Chua blocked him yet again with a flash. Hua Yuhao was truly infuriated this time, and he immediately unleashed his spirit eyes, while his Eye of Destiny appeared at almost the same time. He knew that he would have to use his Eye of Destiny to defeat Wang Chua. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to stop you from saving her. Let me go with you. You will have a greater chance with one more person tagging along. Give me one of those flying things. Wang Chua explained. Hua Yuhao was almost about to fire off his spiritual shock, but he paused as he stared at Wang Chua's eyes, which were full of sincerity. He didn't think too much about it, and said, "All right then." He took out a reserve flying-type soul tool and passed it to Wang Chua as he spoke. Wang Chua took the soul tool, then she asked a little embarrassingly, how do I wear this?" Hua Yuhao was rendered speechless. This girl doesn't know a thing about soul tools. He was far too worried, but he couldn't afford to piss off this girl before him. He had taken advantage of her yesterday, and that gave him a guilty conscience. Furthermore, he wasn't entirely confident of defeating Wang Chua if they actually fought. He felt a little helpless as he stepped forward and helped Wang Chua put the flying-type soul tool on as he briefed her on how to use it. With that, he soared into the sky and infused as much soul power into his own flying-type soul tool as he could before he raced towards the east as fast as he could. Hua Yuhao felt a lot better once he was surging through the air. He wasn't that concerned about Wang Chua not being able to catch up. It would actually be better if she couldn't, as that would save him a lot of trouble. Even if she could, she would be of great help with her abilities. The only thing in his mind was to reach his destination as quickly as possible, and he couldn't be bothered with anything else. This was Wang Chua's first time interacting with soul tools. However, one had to admit that she was very adaptable. She was a little unstable when she first took off, but she quickly mastered the flying-type soul tool's controls. Hua Yuhao had already become a small black dot on the horizon at this point. Wang Chua was a soul emperor after all, and she was a lot stronger than Hua Yuhao in terms of cultivation. She figured out the important parts before she began to speed up as much as she could, and she determined Hua Yuhao's direction of flight as she swiftly pursued him. There wasn't much cover in the sky, and Hua Yuhao had no intention of concealing his movements. Wang Chua flew through the air for a while before she gradually closed the distance. This soul tool is quite interesting. It can actually fly through the air at such rapid speed. Interesting. Wang Chua's expression was filled with curiosity, and she continuously felt the transformations in her flying-type soul tool as she sped through the air. Hua Yuhao was flying in front, but he didn't have to turn back to look. He activated spiritual detection and immediately sensed Wang Chua, who had already caught up with him. "You're quite adaptable, huh? Follow me, then." He didn't bother with Wang Chua anymore as he began to study the map. The map clearly marked out the geographical relationship between Shrek Academy and his destination. The destination was within the Heavenly Soul Empire, and he had to travel east from Shrek Academy all the way to the Heavenly Soul Empire's Heaven Do City, and then he would have to continue northeast. There was a place there where soul beasts resided, called the Setting Sun Forest. The Setting Sun Forest paled in comparison to the Great Star Do Forest, and it was inferior both in reputation and in surface area. However, this was still a forest inhabited by soul beasts. His final destination was located right within this Setting Sun Forest. Hua Yuhao didn't seem like he had to rest at all. He used a milk bottle to replenish his soul power, while he channeled as much as he could. Wang Chua behind him had voluminous soul power, and she relied on her impressive cultivation to finally catch up to Hua Yuhao after 2 hours. "Hey, don't you have to rest?" Wang Chua snapped. They were flying at such breakneck speed that speech was extremely difficult, and they had to release soul power to protect their faces before they could speak. Hua Yuhao glanced at her and handed her a milk bottle. "You can gradually channel soul power inside, and soul power will bounce back to you. You just have to absorb that, and you can replenish your soul power." Wang Chua had no experience with flying-type soul tools, but neither was she averse to using them. She took the milk bottle and attempted to use it in the way Hua Yuhao had described, and she suddenly felt a clean and pure energy flow into her body, and her soul power was swiftly restored. This can restore soul power? Your soul tool research has reached this level?" Wang Chua asked with a look of astonishment. Hua Yuhao wasn't in the mood to explain anything else, so he snapped, "Even if you've never tasted pork, I'm sure you've at least seen a pig before. Do you not know about milk bottles?" Wang Chua grunted coldly and said, "All I can see is a pig flying in the sky." Hua Yuhao extended 2 fingers and said, "2 pigs You're the pig." Wang Chua's face flushed red. Hua Yuhao stopped talking because he had to conserve energy and focus on flying. Shrek Academy was quite far away from Heaven Do City. They continued flying for another 2 hours, but then began to feel a little fatigued, even though they had milk bottles to replenish their soul power. Wang Chua realized that he was ignoring her and shot him a glare. She grunted coldly and said, "Who is it exactly that you're trying to save?" Hua Yuhao didn't respond. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Wang Chua nudged him. They were flying rapidly through the air, and Hua Yuhao was startled and almost lost his balance. He glared at her and said, "Just do it if you want to kill me. Can you stop spouting nonsense? I'm getting frustrated." Wang Chua was just about to erupt, but she held herself back for some reason. She grunted again, but said nothing more. The sky was already bright at this moment. It was a new day, and two very important people were suddenly missing from Shrek Academy's inner courtyard. Yuhao? I haven't seen him. Didn't you send him back last night? Bei Bei stared in confusion at the frustrated Wang Donga before him. Wang Donga had woken up early in the morning and gone to Hua Yuhao's room to see how he was recovering, while she also hoped to listen to his explanation about what had happened the previous day. But to her surprise, Hua Yuhao's room was empty when she arrived. His bed was messy, while he himself was nowhere to be seen. He's not in his room, eldest senior brother. I've already searched around the inner courtyard, he's nowhere to be seen. Wang Donga was worried. She was sad, but she was more concerned with Hua Yuhao's safety. Hua Yuhao had disappeared without a trace, and he didn't leave a note or anything behind. How could she not be worried? Shu Sancha said lazily, perhaps Hua Yuhao feels like there's no way he can account to you for what happened yesterday, and so he ran away. Could he have eloped with Wang Chua? Hee. Wang Donga was infuriated. If you spout any more nonsense, third senior brother, our friendship is over. Bei Bei glared at Shu Sancha and said, stop making things worse. Little junior brother should have said something to Donga even if he's out on official business. He has left without a trace, and that's quite problematic. Don't worry, Donga. How about this? I'll look for Elder Shen, and I'll ask him if he's assigned Yuhao anything, and then we'll search carefully inside the academy for him. It's still very early in the morning, so he can't have gotten far. 2 hours later, inside the Sea God's Pavilion we've searched everywhere. He's not in the academy. I've sent people over to Shrek City, and nobody's seen Hua Yuhao recently. Elder Shen lowered his voice as he spoke. 6 of Shrek's 7 monsters were gathered at this moment. Hua Yuhao had gone missing, and this was a big deal to everybody. Elder Shen's eyes descended on Wang Donga as he said, did he say anything to you yesterday, Donga? What did he do? Wang Donga had been worried for the entire morning, and her eyes were long since red. Hua Yuhao was still nowhere to be seen even though they had been searching for more than 2 hours, and she couldn't be any more worried than she already was. She was just anxious in the beginning, and then she was incensed, but all that was left in her heart right now was nervousness. She was even thinking that she wouldn't pursue anything about what had happened between him and Wang Chua yesterday if he could just return safely. What a kind-hearted girl. She tossed her head from side to side and said, he was still asleep when I escorted him back to rest. However, his vitals had returned to normal. I should have stayed by his side. This is all my fault, all my fault. Wang Donga's voice was starting to break, and she was about to cry. Elder Shen said, don't be hasty. There's something odd about all this. We have discovered from our preliminary investigations that Hua Yuhao isn't the only person that has gone missing. Someone else has disappeared. Everyone was astounded. Was it possible that this other person was the key to finding Hua Yuhao? Elder Shen glanced at Wang Donga and said, the other missing person is Wang Chua. Wang Donga felt as if a lightning bolt struck down on her when she heard that name. Her eyes turned black, then she stumbled forward, and would have fallen if Jiang Nannan hadn't been supporting her. Hua Yuhao had gone missing, and he had actually gone missing at the same time as Wang Chua. Wang Donga didn't dare to follow that train of thought. Shu Sanchi's eyes widened as he muttered softly under his breath, was I right? Maybe they really eloped. Bei Bei kicked him and whispered, shut your filthy mouth. Hua Yuhao isn't an unaccountable person. I think something is wrong. Elder Shen stared at Wang Donga's face, which had lost all color. Bei Bei is right, I think something is wrong. Have you guys considered the possibility that Wang Chua has kidnapped him? Elder Shen's words were like a lifeline to Wang Donga, and she immediately recovered as she stared at Elder Shen with widened eyes. Elder Shen said ponderously, I found it a little strange ever since she joined the academy because she simply looked too much like Donga. In fact, they look almost identical, and their names are equally similar. Donga is also positive that they are not related by blood, while Wang Chua's martial soul is of ultimate strength, something that I have never seen before. All these factors raised my suspicions. However, she has relied on her own abilities to join the inner courtyard, so we cannot reject her. Furthermore, her abilities are quite formidable. My suspicions were greatly allayed ever since your hunting expedition into the Great Stardow Forest. However, something must be wrong, since she vanished along with Hua Yuhao at the same time. Even though outsiders are unaware of how important Hua Yuhao is to Shrek, he has participated in the tournament before, and his twin martial souls are no secret to anyone. It's not impossible that one of our rivals has sent Wang Chua to us with Hua Yuhao as the target. Don't panic, everyone. I have already gathered all the academy's teachers, and we will head out to search for him. I hope that Hua Yuhao is safe. You guys can start moving and head elsewhere to look for him. I'm going right now. Wang Donga couldn't wait any longer as she turned around and disappeared in a flash. Everyone bid their farewells to Elder Shen and departed one after another, until only Bei Bei remained. Why aren't you going? Elder Shen turned towards Bei Bei. Bei Bei frowned and said, Elder Shen, do you really believe that Wang Chua has kidnapped him? I don't think that's right. Shrek wouldn't be the #1 academy on the continent if someone could kidnap him from the Sea God's Pavilion. Nobody knows how senior sister Xiaodao left all those years ago, but we were under attack from powerful enemies back then, and our academy was emptied out as a result. However, you were here with the other elders inside the Sea God's Pavilion to hold down the fort. How could you guys let Wang Chua, who's just a soul emperor, kidnap him? Elder Xian tilted his head and said, "You're still cool-headed." The others' minds were a mess. "You're right, it's unlikely that Wang Chua has kidnapped him. However, you saw how dejected Donga was just now, and I had to find a way to stabilize her before anything else could be done. We don't know why Hua Yuhao has decided to leave, and we don't even know if he left together with Wang Chua. But we can't have any internal problems. I did feel him leave after I got up in the morning. He left by himself, but it felt as if he was in a hurry. I didn't think much about it back then, but it seems he must have run into something. Think carefully, has anything important happened to Hua Yuhao recently? Nobody would ever think, not even in their wildest dreams, that Hua Yuhao's emergency originated from the pouch that Wang Donga had given him. Inside Clear Sky Castle, Niu Tian was tasting the fragrant wine in his cup when his eyes suddenly froze. "What's wrong?" Tiu Tian glanced at him curiously. Niu Tian frowned and said, "That's strange. How has the seal been opened so quickly? That's really strange." Tiu Tian was also surprised as he said, "Are you referring to that pouch that you gave her? It's probably Hua Yuhao if it's been opened." Niu Tian nodded, but he shook his head immediately afterwards and said, "It's not strange that Donga has given the pouch to him. Could you not tell when they returned the last time? Donga's heart is locked onto that fellow. What I find strange is, how does Yuhao have the ability to open that spiritual seal? Does that mean he sought someone else's help to open it?" Tiu Tian drank a mouthful of wine and said, "If it's open, then so be it. He will have to face our final test whether or not he found someone else to help him open it. In the end, the assessment doesn't just test his abilities. More importantly, it tests his love for Donga." Niu Tian said, "I'm not worried that he found someone to help open the seal, nor am I worried that he's found someone to help him find the yearning heartbroken grass. What I'm worried about is that he may have opened the seal by accident, and if that's the case, that place is simply too dangerous for him with his current cultivation. I'm afraid something might happen to him." Tiu Tian was a little confused. "I don't think so. That fellow is quite intelligent. Can he not retreat and run away if he realizes something is amiss? Besides, can your spiritual seal really be opened by accident? I think we should be more concerned about this fellow showing the letter's contents to Donga." Niu Tian heaved a faint sigh and said, "Forget it. We weren't the ones who came up with this test, anyway. Since the test has already begun, we will submit to fate. Fate?" Tiu Tian gazed at the distant sky through the window, and an understanding smile appeared on his face. Niu Tian was momentarily stunned as he watched his brother's expression. Then he seemed to understand as well, and he smiled faintly as he stared at the clear blue skies outside. "Yes, fate." Hua Yuhao and Wang Chua flew for 5 hours, and the Heavenly Soul Empire's Heaven Do City was finally peeking out over the horizon. "Hey, let's take a break," Wang Chua exclaimed softly. "All right." Hua Yuhao nodded and glided downwards. They had been traveling for full speed for 5 hours, and he was so exhausted that all his strength seemed to have left his body. Soul power could be replenished with a milk bottle, but he had to rely on soul power and his own body to defend against the air resistance from high-speed flight. His body was sore from 5 hours of flight, and he felt as if his entire skeleton was falling apart. He wouldn't be able to take it anymore if he didn't rest. They found a small patch of open ground and landed. Hua Yuhao's expression was as calm as water. He withdrew the flying-type soul tool behind his back, crossed his legs, sat down on the ground, and immediately began to meditate. "Hey, aren't you going to eat?" Wang Chua could clearly see that there was something wrong with Hua Yuhao's current behavior. The frustration and worry that seemed to come from his bones had made him a little irrational. "I'm not too hungry. You go ahead." Hua Yuhao's storage-type soul tool always carried some food and water. This was one of the ultimate soldier plan's main requirements. He handed some food and water to Wang Chua before he immediately continued to meditate. Wang Chua didn't push further, and she took the food and water and began to eat. She quietly stared at the cross-legged youth sitting before her as she ate. "Am I going to venture with him into another world of soul beasts? It's only me and him this time. What does he want, exactly? The setting sun forest? How can that compare to the Great Star Do forest? The quality of soul beasts in that area is far inferior to the even Great Star Do forest's hybrid region. Perhaps we won't find a single 100,000-year soul beast over there. Could it be Wang Donga?" But Wang Donga looked fine. Every girl was born with a tendency to probe into others' secrets and be nosy, and Wang Chua was no exception. She stared at Hua Yuhao, who was still meditating, and thoughts ran wild in her head. It didn't take long before she consumed all the rations in her hands. "This tastes terrible." Wang Chua finished her food, but she couldn't help but mutter and criticize it under her breath. She thought to herself that this was a far cry from what he had made before. He makes really delicious food, though. Perhaps that's why Wang Donga likes him so much. Hua Yuhao meditated for 2 hours. He recovered some energy, and his heart was a little calmer than before. He knew that he wasn't in the right state of mind, and he kept telling himself to calm down after he finished meditating. The greater the danger he had to face, the calmer he had to be. Emotional disturbances would only make things worse and harder to deal with in the long run. That was one of the ultimate soldier plan's defining principles, and Hua Yuhao bore it in mind. He wouldn't have lost so much self-control if it hadn't been Wang Donga who was in mortal peril, because he was just too concerned about her safety. Wang Donga was simply too important to him, and it wasn't an easy task for him to ease his nerves in the face of this threat. "Don't worry, Donga. Even if I have to face all the dangers in the world, I will help you get that herb and I will bring it back. Huo Yuhao wasn't hasty to get back on his way, and he fetched some food and water before he began to eat by himself. He wanted to be in his best condition to search for that herb. Wang Chua watched Huo Yuhao quietly consume his food, and she couldn't help but frown. This guy looks quite interesting when he's deep in thought. Hey, don't you have anything to say to me? I'm here to help you, Wang Chua spoke up, displeased. Huo Yuhao heaved a sigh and said, Chua, I will first apologize about what happened yesterday. Even though it was an accident, I will not deny away my responsibility. It was my fault. I didn't correctly judge how strong your attack was, which eventually led to, it was just my fault. However, what I have to do now is exceedingly important to me, more important than my life. Therefore, I will be extremely grateful if you truly want to help me and I will owe you a favor. If you just want to watch the show, or if you want to cause trouble for me, then I beg you, you can do anything you want to me and I'll take it, but only after I've completed this task. Thank you. He stood up as he spoke, and bowed courteously toward Wang Chua at the end. All right. Wang Chua didn't object. One of these things belonged to her anyway, and she took one before she sat down with her legs crossed. Huo Yuhao said, I'll protect you. You can go first, okay? Wang Chua made sure she was sitting properly cross-legged. She waved her right hand, and a golden streak of soul power enveloped the left leg bone. The left leg bone was entirely purplish-black in color, and it flickered with pale silver light. A deep dragon roar could be heard as the soul power on Wang Chua's body trembled, and a golden layer of light encompassed and permeated the entire bone immediately afterwards. Ding! A faint chiming sound could be heard, and the left leg bone transformed into a flowing purplish-black beam of light that drifted toward Wang Chua. It followed her golden soul power, and she directed it into her left leg before it disappeared. Purplish-black light circled twice around Wang Chua's left leg before it vanished, and her body began to shine with golden light once again. Huo Yuhao was standing guard for her, but even he could feel an immense pressure coming from her. What a powerful martial soul! Even though the Ice Jade Empress Scorpion was also an ultimate martial soul, Huo Yuhao could clearly feel that the Ice Jade Empress Scorpion was still a little inferior to the Golden Dragon in terms of strength. Wang Chua's Golden Dragon martial soul was probably at a higher level than the Dragon God Doluor's Radiant Holy Dragon and the Dragon Emperor Doluor's Darkness Holy Dragon, which meant that it was probably the purest inheritance of Dragon-type martial souls. Who knew how powerful she would be if she could become a titled Doluor one day? This video will end here. Thank you for watching.